My name's Amy Newsom. I'm an architect and focused on medical planning here at DesignGroup. Thank you. So I'm going to present to you a recent master plan study that we did. And the envelope of pieces that you are being given isn't just meant to entertain you if I'm boring. Basically what it is supposed to be like an abstract illustration of the process that we went through to get to our final result. So as I move through the presentation, you'll see a gray bar with white writing, questions and answers to give you hints of how to solve this simple challenge maybe. So you can choose to play with it now. We'll give you a few minutes throughout to review the rules that we've come up with. So basically one of DesignGroup's dearest clients said, we want you to do an analysis of our downtown campus. Basically, so we had to understand what we were working with. So these are some basic metrics of that campus. There's about 2 million square feet of program space, 1.5 million parking, 10 buildings, 5 parking garages, all of these things. So then the client let us know what they wanted us to look for. So basically, they had 4 main goals: define the highest and best use of each of the campus buildings, expand the emergency departments. There was both an adult and a children's that needed basically growth a long time ago. An increased number of NICU beds with a potential amplified OB volume, and an increased number of adult inpatient beds. There were 2 caveats to their demands. The first one is that they were not interested in any new building. There was no appetite to spend that money or have that risk. So the second was, for the increase of beds, we don't have a target number to give you. Basically, we know that we want more NICU beds, and we might be comfortable with a number, but if we get this OB volume, then that number will become very uncomfortable. So we need more. So it's like we had no parameter. So we were kind of developing several options along the way. Also for adult inpatient beds, they wanted to see what made sense. They also didn't want us to get bogged down in service lines because basically they knew they were going to do renovations in the main hospital. So this was supposed to be kind of a relief valve for them so they didn't lose numbers while they were working, and then the potential to keep them after. So that's why we say it's kind of discovering the rules, because we just had to start exploring every possibility. So this is a view from 20,000 feet of the entire campus. What we started doing was dissecting every square foot of the 2 million square feet. We were looking for opportunities, vacancies, things that have become vacant, and what I was calling programmatic residue, like things that don't make sense together anymore, possibly people that moved to do renovations that never moved back, that kind of thing, what seems out of place. The second was what we were looking for were kind of what we were calling non-opportunities. We've done a lot of work in this hospital, and the last thing that we wanted to do was to suggest undoing recent progress. Wouldn't make either us or our client look very good. So what we did was we made kind of generalizations. We defined 11 projects through the course of studying these different, all the program on the campus. And what we discovered is we couldn't really do these 11 projects in isolation. If we were thinking about the client's ultimate goals, a lot of these generalizations and areas of concentration were enabling projects of one of the other. But what we did identify was the fact that if you wanted to expand your emergency department, you could do that adult, and then you could do the children's, and neither of those were necessarily dependent on one another or the completion of one another. But with the NICU beds, the OB volume, and the adult inpatient beds, it was really futile to consider solving one without the other, and basically the reason why is they were competing for the same space, essentially, if we're not building a new building. So what we began to do is isolate the 3 buildings on campus that it made sense, any kind of sense, to put inpatient care space. And the first section shows those 3 buildings and the floors that are appropriate. And then when we took out those non-opportunistic spaces, the floors that had recently been renovated or planned to be renovated, that kind of left us with 6 floors only. So not too bad. We went from 2 million square feet to about 500,000 square feet, and now we're down to 175,000 square feet. That's much more digestible. So as we went on, because they weren't looking at specific service lines, we took these 6 floors and fit them out. We needed to get to that level of detail so that we could actually tell the client what they were going to gain, how much money it was going to cost, which I should note here that we worked with the most patient engineers and contractors to develop cost and time for each of these. So what was developed, well, I should say that in this level of complexity with what we were working with, for something like the NICU bed solution, their current state, the way they're currently operating, is not the way that it will be when the renovations are complete. So if we're looking for an additional, when you're having meetings with the steering committee and these people that are working within the facility, and we're saying, yes, the target number is 112, and they're like, well, that's only 3 or 4 additional beds. And it's like, well, but when you complete your renovations 2 years from now, you're actually going to be down 8, so you really need to build for 12. That makes those 3 beds very expensive. And then another thing is with this potential OB volume, what they wanted to look at was if they were the most efficient hospital in the entire world, what would they max out at in their current space? You know, basically they were talking about taking on volume, which is like 50% more than what they were currently doing. So that's a lot. So why can't they do that in the space they currently have? What's the limiting factor? What is it in all these different scenarios? And then they didn't have an appetite for building a new building, but we kept that in the discussion just as a base point of reference. So we could always make sure that we were keeping ourselves in check of not proposing something that took way longer or cost more than perhaps an easier solution. What that allowed us to do is then to zoom back out. And essentially, we were able to present back to the leadership of this one hospital an a la carte menu, like a graphic a la carte menu. What we did was we had prices attached to each of these. So we could say in this auxiliary building, like a pavilion, you can build 28 additional adult beds for $10.5 million. That includes displacing and moving everybody that's currently there. And so we can compare that to, well, if you actually did renovate this one floor of the hospital, you gain 60 beds, but now you have to displace the people that are there. That then is this additional money to move those existing departments out and then put that somewhere else. So this was this allowed us to create more concrete rules for ourselves, not so ambiguous. We could really see what the client wanted and didn't want. But what it also let us know where these became like if-then statements. If you do this, then you can do this. But since all of these things are competing for these same 6 floors, you can't do everything. So I don't know. I don't hear anybody playing with their pieces. So that did not go well. But essentially, we can regroup these rules now. And kind of the idea is like, we didn't start out with set parameters. We kind of discovered our own rules. And some of them were generalizations that we made. Some of them were discovery, some of them were concrete, and then some of them just gave us direction. It was kind of, we could isolate certain rules. And what we were trying to understand was like, basically all of this like intense scrutiny and detail and moving backwards and forwards to different levels of information. There was so much information, it was so complex. But our client wanted us to give them a tool so that they could go to their executive committee. Like moving back and forth to different diagrams was not going to go well for anyone either. So how do we put their biggest decision making and the gains and the cost into one simple image? So here you have 2 of the main concepts that we discovered. Their main decisions were this ancillary department that didn't belong where it was, and it was in the way of everything we tried to do. Basically, that ancillary department, it's either going to stay, it's going to move somewhere else on campus, or it's going to move off campus. So that in conjunction with the birth volume, if you don't get it, then you can clearly see this is your solution. And so that defines how much you would gain, how much it would cost. So along with that, we also added in an aspect of time. So when we added the element of time, we took those 7 options, gave them a schedule, showed them kind of what they were getting into with each option. Each option has a cost associated with it, then it has a total project cost, and then it has the estimated gains that you would be getting out of making that specific decision.